Right. Well, we enjoyed that. Somebody to Love, Queen on BBC London 94.9. And what it did, Jamie Kelsey-Fry, with Mel Producer, is we started having a conversation about popular modern music.
Yeah, because we're keeping up with the hit parade, aren't we? I listen to it on the wireless all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can remember being a massive Queen fan when I was a lot younger, but not so much now. I don't know. Yeah, classic, great, yeah. But, there were other artists of the time I need to give more attention to these days. That's what I've said. Although not that I didn't love that track we just played.
Absolutely. No, that's great, but I wouldn't put a Queen album on. But by the way, listeners, I don't have any Queen albums at home. Or any Elton John albums, particularly, Rock of the Westies, which is a very rare Elton John album. But no, I wouldn't put that on anymore. But you're right, as we were chatting, there's some fantastic artists who seem to have lasted the time and seem to be, dare I say it, in front of all the Queen fans out there, more interesting. Oh, my lord.
What we were just talking about.
Cardiacs were good, for example, but then they're bands that people don't hear about that are always really good.
Yeah,
you don't have to make it to be brilliant, it turned out.
Well, who knew? Who knew? You don't have to be a big multinational brand to be the best at it.
It usually goes downhill as soon as that happens, doesn't it?
Exactly.
What happened to you too?
They're so over. Jamie Kelsey-Fry, contributing editor for the New Internationalist magazine. You know the reason why I can't say your name properly is because you brought me some incredibly gorgeous chocolate to eat.
Yes, I'm gumming up your mouth. This is a trick I've learned.
It's actually your fault. So, thank you so much for spending your Sunday night with us for a bit.
It's always a pleasure.
Listen, there's so many stories for us to discuss, and you've really brought us there's a hefty list of stories for us to talk about.
Yeah.
Shall we just get straight into this? I do want to talk to you about what you might have been up to or might not have been up to on Friday, right?
Yeah, sure.
There was stuff happening in London with the Occupy group, which I know you're involved with, so I want to know about that. But actually, this kind of speaks of that too, this first story that you've selected.
Yeah, absolutely. I put a tweet out, so sometimes when I do this, I put a tweet out saying what kind of stories would people think I should talk about, and someone tweeted this story in, and it's fascinating, because I work with young people, that's my main thing. I give active citizenship workshops, and this is called From UKIP to the Green Party, the young people looking for an alternative. While the big parties stagnate, once fringe rivals are attracting more and more members in school or college. So it's about how many young people are now fighting for the UKIP, stand. Young UKIP followers, what are they called? The Young Independents, they're called. And there's quite a growing amount of them. And also, there's a huge growing amount of young people joining the Green Party. The Young Greens have seen the greatest swelling in numbers, with a 165% rise in membership, going from 1,700 to 4,500. But what's interesting is why, and it's total despair with the current system. So what they see as the sort of mainstay of the current system, they're sort of turning against. UKIP obviously purports to be, a shift away from the kind of entrenched system, and of course the Green Party definitely is a shift away from the entrenched system. And I just think it's interesting that young people are still very political, which is great, but also that they are really looking further than what's generally, the grey mass in the middle. And also from working with young people a lot, that's the response I get. They're very conscious of the fact that it doesn't seem to make much difference which main parties they're going for,
Now, again, Friday we were talking about this with UKIP's second MP Mark Reckless being elected in the by-election over at Rochester and Stroud. We were having a discussion about, was this about Europe, or was this about being able to vote for an alternative on the right? And the Greens seem to be an alternative on the left. I'm fascinated to see now who's going to take, well, in theory, what could be best described in a quick way as the Lib Dems' role as an alternative to the centre.
That's really interesting, because the article doesn't touch on the youth version of the Lib Dems, but one of the other stories that we're going to talk about tonight was, there was a huge student demonstration recently about the fees, and this portrayal really drove deeply with the youth movement, the student movement, by Nick Clegg and the Lib Dems, saying...
Who made a big swing toward the Lib Dems. Almost 5 years ago now, there was a promise. The promise was, we're your party, we will not muck about with your tuition fees. And then immediately they get into power with the Conservatives, and they do.
Absolutely.
And that generation felt cheated by it.
So that's why I think there's a paucity of young Lib Dems fighting out there. For the 22-year-old chairman of the Young Greens, Clifford Fleming, also a former Lib Dem, so many of them were former young Lib Dems, and they've switched to the Green Party instead. But also, that led to big demonstrations originally when Nick Clegg kind of reneged on his promise. and they were very violently suppressed. And that's why it's interesting that, again, this large movement's formed, very well organised, that's fighting not to kind of freeze the tuition fees, but actually to wipe them out altogether and to go back. I think also what's an interesting attitude of the students who were demonstrating about 8 days ago, they're saying that one of the key problems is that because of these high costs, when they're going into education, the only onus must be on do stuff for profit, to make money, because you're going to have to pay back your huge debt. And they've got a really good argument, because they're saying education, when it used to be free, was for enrichment. So in other words, it enabled people to actually see the opportunity of being there for 3 years to sort of widen your perspectives and enrich your knowledge and see areas where you haven't thought of before, where you may want to go and have a career. Whereas everything, because of the huge debt process that they've got, everything is, we have to do a degree that's going to guarantee us a job, and lots of people are being paid for possibly by the companies that they're going to go and work for, and that's a real switch, the commodification of knowledge.
Well, actually, and speaking as someone from the world of education, the commodification, which is a great word and a great way of putting it, didn't that begin when we started to try and delineate between who's performing and who isn't in terms of success at schools? The minute we judge success at schools by simply merely exam results, then immediately everything is all leaning and bearing toward, well, what is the country getting back from this education, rather than what are we enriching our new young citizens with?
That's the terrible switch. And I mean, I was a teacher for over 20 years, and I saw the increase in pressure on exams and having to kind of keep those league tables going. And that began to completely contort a teacher's job. And the pressure on the young people was so bad, Kath, that, I used to invigilate exams. Often I saw this. And it's 10 o'clock, you have 2 hours, turn over your question paper, and I saw children pass out because they were so full of fear of it. But bear this in mind, this is a very sort of backward approach to education that we're suffering through at the moment. Young people used to say to me in my tutor group, etc., they say, you're kind of working out how valuable we are by how well we do in exams. And I'm going, yeah. And they're going, so really what you're doing is you're testing us on our memory, aren't you? And I'm going, yeah. And they said, have any of you not heard of Google? Which is just so important. And, that's absolutely the base by which we should proceed to develop a much more useful form of education. Why on earth are you going to be valued on your ability to remember things? What you should be valued on is your powers of assimilation, your ability to kind of do self-directed
comprehension.
learning. Yeah, exactly. Critical thinking doesn't exist except for in citizenship, which is extraordinary. And as a result, you have complaints from universities where you've got young people who've got good grades because they were good at remembering things, but they can't have any lateral thinking, they can't have any innovation.
Their analysis is weak.
Absolutely,
Not that I'm speaking, my students are incredible, by the way. Let's make that clear. Some others, I'm sure. Not my students are amazing. If you've got your headphones on, wonderful. Let's have a chat with George in Highgate, who wants to have a chat about young people, and talk to yourself as well.
Brilliant.
George, welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Good evening.
What would you like to say to Jamie, George?
Well, young people and politics and the Occupy movement, isn't it about time that young people came up with their own party and changed everything? Because young people can change everything. It irritates me that there is no proper student young people's movement emerging, and surely it has to. Can't you encourage them to come up with their own party?
George, wonderful, interesting point.
Brilliant, yeah. I'd say that there's a movement in, there's an actual political party in Spain called Podemos, and that's very much a much younger party, and it sort of uses a lot of the kind of ideals of the Occupy movement or the Indignado or M15 movement in Spain. But I think you're absolutely right, and with what I've found in my experience as someone who facilitates active citizenship in young people is they have much more sort of clear-thinking, cogent ideas about what a fairer society looks like. They're not really as adulterated as adults are. And there's a wonderful sort of advocate for what you're talking about, George. In other words, an advocate for young people being heard much more. His name's Craig Kielberger, who started a campaign at the age of 12. And we interviewed him in my school on Skype years ago. And one of the questions the 14-year-olds asked was, what did you do when you were 12? When you came up against adults and they didn't take you seriously, what did you do about that, Craig? And his answer was profound. He said, well, hold on. So adults so far are responsible for approaching catastrophic climate change, endless war for the last resources in the planet, abuse of human rights. Totally. He listed all these failures, and he said, "Why don't we stop taking adults seriously?" And I thought that was such an interesting way of turning it around. And if you look at what Craig Kilber did, he's very, very wise. He'd be a great leader, and I agree with you totally. I think it's what we're viewing at the moment, particularly with the kind of more youth getting involved in things like Occupy Democracy, but also with the huge student movement that's building at the moment, is that they're moving towards exactly that, George, where I think you will see the emergence of a youth-based party in this country.
I'm sure that's going to happen as well. And I thought with the work you're doing with young people, you should be encouraging them to start up their own party movement and lead the way to a much better future than is on offer from any of the parties that are looking for our votes at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea. I mean, if you look at the work I do, it's RAX Toolkit, R-A-X Toolkit. So I do go around the country empowering young people with, advocacy skills, critical thinking skills, and taking informed and responsible action. But then a lot of those young people will become political leaders in the future, but whether they become political leaders of parties that they've created themselves or not is the problem, because very often they grow up and then join one of the existing ones. But at the moment, as I say, a lot of young people are seeing a complete failing in the entire democratic system, and I think that will lead to them forming their own party, which would be brilliant.
OK, George, we're going to leave it there for the second, but thank you. We're leaving it there so we can talk to somebody else. Burchak is in Dulwich. How you doing, Burchak?
I'm very, very fine, thank you, Kath, and I'm the first-time caller to your show.
Oh, well... well, I tell you what, Burchak, it's a genuine pleasure to have you join us. Thank you. You wanted to make a point about the Occupy movement and UKIP, so go ahead.
Brilliant.
My first one is the Occupy movement. I obviously I don't condone violence, but at this moment I respected the students, although they shouldn't have been riots like a bit of bashing and this and that and the rest. But the students, the people had enough. They go to university, they have to pay tuition fees, and then when they do pay the tuition fees, what is comical is that they either come out either selling popcorn or work in the phone shop. They don't get the good jobs. And, Jamie, why is this? Because they work so hard and it's become backward. It's become like some countries where they finish the biggest university and they either become road workers or they become busmen. I mean, it's getting backwards like the Soviet Union. Do you agree? England is getting a bit backwards.
I agree, particularly in what you're talking about, Burchak, with this example. I agree completely, and I really feel for young people because they're emerging in a time where there's less and less jobs. As you say, when they emerge out of college, that they're crippled by tuition fee, the debts that they've got to pay, and my generation, I'm 50, so sort of the baby boomers, we just left nothing for them. Imagine trying to we're in London, so if you're young and you're trying to get on to that mortgage, you're never going to get a mortgage. It's impossible to get a property here. There was a story that I was talking about recently that was, it was how if you're under 30, you will not survive. You are going to have a really terrible kind of time. Your future is looking very gloomy. And they were talking about how you might have to work and work and work until you're 40 to be able to get a mortgage in somewhere on the peripheries of London. And then you'll probably find that house will get snatched by a baby boomer who is enlarging their property portfolio and just buying their sixth place. And it's just outrageous. That's why I really support young people who are trying to kind of challenge the system itself. That Occupy signifies that, the Occupy Democracy movement signifies that, and that much braver student-based movement really signifies it. They've had enough and they're not going to take any more.
Jamie, then, that Occupy movement, can it translate to a political party? That's
the key question that a lot of people ask. It has done in Spain with Podemos. But in the Occupy movement, and I'm just someone who's observed it for a long time, the Occupy movement is very much against that because they believe that that's paying into kind of the system that you're against. So it's a double-edged sword. A lot of people say, well, you've got to get into the system to change it
from the inside.
I think what will happen is a much larger mass civil disobedience movement is going to happen over the next 2 or 3 years. And I think Occupy is a sort of canary in the mine, along with some other great groups as well. And then that will eventually translate into some kind of political party. All the politicians will realise they have to actually stop being the servants of corporations. They have to stop backing up the banks. They have to stop bowing down to the financial institutions and allowing tax havens to continue. They'll have to actually, otherwise they won't exist anymore.
Oh, there's a great George Monbiot piece about, talking of tax havens, describing, the UK as a new tax haven, is what we'll see happening. Fascinating. Berjack, thank you so much for giving us a call. It was great to hear from you, to hear from new callers, in fact, in particular. Why don't we, if it's all right with you, Jamie, then move on to, I suppose... this is a very different story, if you don't mind. 80 landmarks in 80 years. The people and events that have shaped our world. Again, as someone who teaches citizenship and empowers young people, this will be a fascinating story for you, full stop, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant, actually. It's coming out from... what's the organisation? Oh, it's at the beginning, sorry. So it's a global poll commissioned by the British Council of the greatest moments, discoveries and people of the past 8 decades. And there's loads of interesting things about it, and I'll recommend that everyone does check it out. It's going to be coming out through their Twitter feed. I mean, you can find the top 20 already, but to get the full 80, there's a hashtag that they've got coming out. I'll tell you what it is in a sec. It'll just pop up in front of me. Oh, here you go. The hashtag is hashtag 80 moments. So find out what all 80 is. But what was interesting is they spread the people who voted on it culturally. But so it's a global sort of decision. And I won't go straight to what number 1 is, but I wonder if you listeners can guess what it is. But it was fascinating to see the differences in different countries and what they valued. For example, Live Aid was seen as being a very big deal by Egypt for some reason, but Egypt and India didn't put the Second World War in the top 80 at all, which is really interesting how you see the kind of, where you are geographically around the planet, how your sort of idea of history completely changes. One of the contenders that got quite high up because of the Far East was the invention of the instant noodle. That was a really big deal. And another one that really stuck out was in Japan. The life and times of Michael Jackson was right up there. They were very high on Michael Jackson. He comes in at number 49.
A cultural icon around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So that sort of global side of it I thought was very interesting. Russians were especially keen on voting for I was going to give you the answer yet. The number 1. And also, they were also very keen on the breakup of the Soviet Union. Shall I go to say it? Shall I? I know you're all just like on the edges of your seats there, folks. No, it's of course the invention of the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee. And I'm personally very chuffed about that, because if anyone's been listening to me when I've been on here, I always go on about what a hero that person was, for one particular reason, other than the fact it's a genius invention that's changing our species. He didn't give it to anyone. He didn't. He had billions, trillions offered to him by states, countries, corporations, and he said, no, this is for everyone. And if you remember the opening ceremony of the Olympics...
Absolutely.
And everyone was going, who's that old geezer? That's the thing about Tim. I love, scientists are often, totally humble, so they don't want to be famous. So this old guy comes out, and he just types on a computer and it comes out everywhere, doesn't it? And this is for everyone. I think it came out on everyone's mobile phones at that moment as well. And he has changed the world. But
I've got goosebumps just thinking about that moment in the opening ceremony for the 2012 Olympics.
I cry. I mean, I think if you remember my the love of my life, Anita, she worked on that with Danny Boyle. She did the graphics. Okay, so I went to see one of the last run through with a mate of mine. I owed a favour to Charlie, and we turned up, and we were treated. They wanted to try out how they're going to look after dignitaries. Okay, so we got picked up in a golf cart.
You had the VVIP treatment.
VVIP golf cart, beautiful meal, lots of champagne, and then we went in and we saw it start. And I started crying, basically. And I looked at Charlie and he was crying. And I said, I love you, man.
Oh.
It was one of those man love moments. But we just went on for another hour and a half, whatever. Just absolutely blown away. Very, very, very proud to be English. All the stuff that they showed in there was stuff to be immaculately proud of. And the bit that stuck out for us all, of course, was when the NHS was being celebrated. And then all these horrific nightmare characters from children's stories rose up and destroyed the NHS. I don't know if you noticed that, but that was quite an interesting move, wasn't it, from good old Danny?
Was more about great children's literature, I think. But, you say potato. I say it's not a politically motivated statement. Okay, thank you. That is a good story, and definitely one to read. That you'll find that in the Observer. You'll go online and find it all, but the list is fascinating. And I've just got to say, because they share the top 20. Of course, I think the World Wide Web is a very justified number 1. But the others... Number 2, the discovery of the mass production with penicillin.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a tough one. How do you decide whether the web's more important than that? I don't know who had the job of that.
I don't know what their criteria were. But
Absolutely, a tough old decision to try and choose between.
did you see any surprises in there that you thought, oh, that doesn't belong in there?
Well, no, I just feel
They're all
like
pretty
it's
big.
possible. They're all pretty huge things, including, well, again, as awful as they were, absolutely tragic as they were, the attacks of the 11th of September,
Yeah.
they may have changed an international political scene, but then you see the breakup of the Soviet Union's number 8 and the September the 11th attacks number 5. Well, surely that should be inverted, or I don't know how you do this. These are all massive situations in our life and in a modern history setting that are just, they're too hard to even comprehend. The Holocaust is number 14. I don't know who decides that anyway. Thank you.
A large group of people from around the world, and yeah, but it's, I really, I think it really makes you reflect upon this species, and it's good to look at us on a much wider terms, rather than what's happening yesterday and today.
Absolutely.
What's made us.
We have another call.
Great.
This time Trevor is over in Wembley. How you doing, Trevor?
Yeah, hi, Kath.
Do you know, I immediately want to call you Trev. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine, no problem.
Trev.
Right, Trev.
I to you as well.
So, Trev, you wanted now, I mentioned this earlier at the top of the show, talked about the male model, David Gandy, and his pants for M&S.
Yeah.
There are other pants stores available. But I wanted to know, because there's a conversation in one of the papers talking about, in the Daily Mail, talking about how men should be maybe are becoming more conscious of the way they look because of the advertising images of perfect male bodies around. What do you think about that? Do you think that all these male models in campaigns and adverts, are they making men feel insecure?
Well, they don't make me feel insecure. I personally get sick of seeing them because I know that they're only there because they want to sell whatever, I don't know, underpants, socks or whatever. It's just all, like, in this system, it's just all for profit. And I just think if they're going to, keep insisting on these using advertising, why can't they use, like, guys admit I've got a bit of a beer belly?
So so to sell pants for a major high street retailer, you're going to be, Trev, in your pants with a bit of a bare belly stood there, giving it large, modelling.
I say, why not? Why not?
Why not?
I'm not saying I wouldn't.
I'm being serious. Why not?
Yeah.
Listen, Trev,
Yeah?
there will be a very different world if they used me and thee for the campaign for M&S Undies. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, but part of the world might be much less anorexia and bulimia. I mean, it's a real that whole stereotype that they kind of force that body on you is just totally unrealistic and damaging. Trev, that I don't know if you know the political comedian called Mark Thomas. Okay, he did.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, you've got to check out what he did. So he did a tour a while ago called the People's Charter, and when he did the tour, he got people to fill in what they thought should be laws. And one of them was models should be chosen the same way that juries are chosen, all right? So in other words, totally random, because he was saying, I'd love my dad to ring me up saying, sorry, son, can't meet you, I've got a Calvin Klein this morning. And, then we returned to just having normal bodies, and people don't get so upset about their body shape, which is just, you're dead right, Trevor, it's all about money. It's all about money.
I think the way I'd look at it, it's like as if it's I might coin a new phrase or whatever, fatism, like, as if we've got, like I said, like, I've got a bit of a beer belly, so just because I've got a beer belly, does that mean, I can't be, used to sell underpants, socks or whatever, just because of my, I've got a bit of a tubby belly?
Listen, Trev, the more you say it, the more it makes me smile, because it's human, it's normal.
Exactly.
But hang on a second. Yes, I agree, it is about marketing, it is about consumerism. However, pictures of, and not to just make it about your tubby belly, Trev, because I've got a bit of extra bark around the middle. If it's me and thee and we're selling undies, we won't sell as many, will we? I mean, even if you put me in a nice lighting and you Photoshop some of the muffin top away, it's still not going to work as well as having a supermodel wearing the same pants.
I understand, because, I mean, like, if someone's got a beer belly, it's going to distract from what they want us to look at,
it's about aspiration, isn't it? When we look at adverts, I'm not saying we all need to see someone who is absolutely perfect. So these pictures of David Gandy in undies, well, that's extreme, isn't it? But even if they got someone who looked a little bit more normal, some of the other magazines that I would read might have a bigger girl wearing something. they're still beautiful. They still Photoshop them. Isn't advertising about the perfect ideal, or at least better than real life anyway?
Yeah, but again, I mean, as I said, it's just about the product, not the person, really. Because, at the end of the day, all they want us to, they're hoping that we'll buy whatever it is that the person is wearing. So really, the most important thing to them is the product. But,
Gotcha.
they just want, because they
don't care about what the consequences could be.
Yeah, in the real world, I mean, I don't think they care about who, whether the person that buys them has got a beer belly or not, but they obviously want us to buy the product. But they don't want us to see, everyday people, you could say, that may buy that product, which may be someone like me with a bit of a beer belly.
Well,
so why not? Why don't they just change the way they do things? I mean,
Trev, hang on.
They're scared that they'll lose the money, and that's what it comes down to, really.
Well, to be honest, I think if it's about aspirational marketing, they're all at it. It would take 2 or 3 very brave retailers to change things. But the only people that really could change things, it is me and thee. It's us. We're the ones. If we see someone with normal advertising, we go in droves to buy the product, then they will all change. That is one thing I do know. If there's money to be made, they'll all give it a try. Can I also ask you then about Gordon Brown? You wanted to talk about him as well. What's his legacy? If it's true, because it's being reported today that he's going to stand down as a politician at the next election. What's the man's legacy?
My first thought when I heard that this morning, I thought, so what? So what? I'm not going to, to me, that's not news, Kath. That's not news.
Really? So the fact that this is the chap that when, in September, we were at our darkest hour in terms of anyone who decided that they wanted Britain to remain united with Scotland, he shows up, sweeps in, makes an impassioned speech, he energises the debate, and he turns things around and saves the so-called English politicians' bacon, right? So do we not think of him positively because of that?
No.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, it was the people that made their own minds up, not regardless of what he said and the hours that he spent, on the podium or whatever. It's the people that, went into the poll box or whatever and, done the cross or whatever. I think with this, I think the problem with this is that we make too much of these politics. We exhort them too much. And then, it's like as if we expect so much from them and then they let us down.
Okay.
And, and as I said, to me, that's not news. I don't care. It makes me sound mean, but I don't
No, it doesn't.
care.
No, it doesn't.
Trevor, it makes you sound like a man with an opinion, and that is what we like on this programme.
Okay.
It is. It is exactly what we like. Can I say thank you? Thank you for giving us a call. Pleasure to hear your thoughts. Wow, strong opinions. Again, I kind of respect that. I kind of respect him saying, do you know what? Not bothered. Bye. Don't let the door hit your bottom on the way out.
Well, I know a lot of people feel like that, without a doubt, particularly young people we were talking about earlier.
We're
they
tired.
feel so betrayed.
We're tired by all politicians.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the big things that I know, in the recent decade is the expenses scandal, and anyone who you're speaking to on the street, invariably people go, I don't trust any of them. They're all in it for themselves, and that's just what you hear everywhere. So I don't know. I wouldn't be able to. I do know what I think about his mate, but we're not going to go into that, I suppose.
Well, absolutely. But I'm happy to talk to everyone, unless you want to. But I'm happy to talk to everyone else. When we're hearing Trevor say something like that regarding Gordon Brown, don't really care, fine, okay, I get it. But if I gave you the choice of the last Labour government that we dealt with, there were 2 prime ministers, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Which of the 2 did you prefer in charge of the country, or did you hate them both? You can call me and tell me that if you like. 0207 224 2000. Right, of course, you are listening to BBC London 94.9. I'm Kath. I'm in for Nikki with you till 1. With me till a little after 11, maybe. Jamie Kelsey-Fry, who's the contributing editor for the New Internationalist magazine. And also a man of, what I'd say, a London teacher too.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I do training all the time.
Yeah, he does all sorts, actually. Campaigner and the like. We do have a couple more stories to talk about. I wondered if we could... This one was around, and it's already been mentioned this weekend.
Yeah.
but I was quite keen to ask you and get a male perspective on this. This is the story about, or this is actually a different angle on the story about this controversial person called Julien Blanc, who's been barred from the UK. He's also described as this, what I think is the company pickup artist. That's his seminars.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Essentially giving what seems to be very scary advice on how to approach women.
Well, that was Julien Blanc, and this guy in the article, I took a class on how to pick up women. I learned more about male anxiety. That's the title of the piece in the Observer, and it's just obviously picking up on, because everyone's talking about it at the moment. God, you keep using the phrase "pick up" now. This is a more mellow version, I suppose, of Julien Blanc, but still, I think reprehensible to put it mildly. I never looked into things like this, but they talk about the book The Game, which is the Bible of the pickup artist. It was full of terminology like negs, N-E-G-S, comments designed to subtly reduce a woman's self-esteem so that she seeks your approval. That's like a style, yeah.
That is so disgusting.
I know, and this is it. Yeah, it's kind of disturbing, but then also very sad because basically the journalist Gareth Rubin goes on one of these courses, not with Julien Blanc, by some other guy who I'm not going to name.
This story is inspired by the whole point of what Julien Blanc was refused the visa for, but actually these are in the UK already. These are happening.
Oh yeah, there's people making a lot of money out of this, it turns out.
Dear.
But it's funny and sad, but I wanted to pick up on a couple of things. He starts by going, most of you know my story, he told us. Until I was 21, I was a shy, geeky virgin, but then I changed. And now he's going to change us in the same way. Explain that if we believe we are a force of nature, then women won't be able to keep their hands off you. It's just really strange. It's like, it just objectifies everything and makes it unreal. And I'll tell you what the point I'm making is this, okay? Alongside him are a number of trainers who are apparently specialists in certain aspects of pickup artistry. One would give us a 30-minute seminar on body language, then another on opening lines. Your opener is the first words out of your mouth. Most guys leave it to chance, not us. And that's when I stopped and thought about this. So what you're talking about is it's something that's totally artificial, and you can't, there's no style to it, there's no techniques here. To be honest, the moment you're being artificial, you're playing a game, then it smells, doesn't it? It does to me anyway. There's one in here that's great. They say, here's a good tip. So, you're trying to chat up a woman and she's got earrings, and what you should say is, hey, they're lovely. I bet they've got a story to them. Because, and he says, because invariably
my husband gave them to me.
My husband. Exactly. But there's something, pretty sad about it all.
Can I say, it immediately, what it stinks of? It stinks of a gullibility. It stinks of taking advantage of some lonely people. And in this situation, lonely guys who, I don't know, for whatever reason have decided that it's their fault that they haven't met someone special. And they are being preyed upon, conned. That there is some universal answer to creating a connection with a significant person. And to be perfectly frank, if you go to these classes, please, before you do, it's just not worth your money.
No.
You could probably read a self-help book and get more assistance, but more than anything, just go and be nice to some women in your life and try and meet some new people, and before you know it, you might bump into someone. I mean, I know what's happening. Male producers outside probably just like, what is she talking about? What nonsense is coming out of that woman's mouth? But I'd rather you went on some sort of dating website and attempted to meet someone like-minded, as opposed to thinking that in a bar there's one magic line.
Yeah.
Something like, oh, did it hurt when you fell from heaven? Nonsense. Absolute. Makes me think you're an absolute... I won't say what it makes me think because I'll get sacked. But it makes me think that.
Not heaven, Luton Airport. But there's a couple of things, actually. One thing that made me think was, what is a chat-up workshop for how women can chat up men? And I thought that would be really interesting, because it'd probably be like, do you want to come back to my place? Okay. The end. Just so straightforward.
I think actually it could be, can I buy you a drink?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Yes, you... do you care how I look? No, I don't. No. Okay, then. Let's go. That's how that works.
I'll tell you what, it does link to what Trevor was saying earlier on, which is, advertising. There's so many reasons why people are... There's so many elements of modern day life that seem to be designed to make you feel inadequate. You just can't go anywhere with that. Oh, I don't have the love of my life. I don't have a partner that looks like that. I can't afford those clothes. I can't go on. It just goes on and on. You're just totally being pounded by this like consumerist hammer going, you are inadequate. And it's a way of, manipulating people. That's how advertising works. I would suggest actually one of the big solutions to it is just blank out adverts. Absolutely blank them out of your life. You know, it's really hard to do, but you can. You know, we don't watch television. You know, of course you're not allowed to deface things anymore, but just to look at them and imagine, just turn them around in your mind imaginatively and change the words and look at them what they really are. You know, it's called semiotics, isn't it? Sign and signify. You know, so on the one hand, there's an advert for a car, but actually that's the signifier. The sign is you should be rich, you should be white, you should be blonde haired, you should be this body shape, you should have these aspirations. All the rubbish messaging that has to continually be rammed into you for you to continue to think that, yeah, consumerism, materialism, the way things are going, they're absolutely fine, this is how life should be. Rubbish. It's absolutely totally unimaginative way of being in it, and it doesn't means nothing. It's meaningless. Life has got so much on offer, and it's not. They can't advertise what's really valuable. You know, it's just our human nature socialising. Love is found through being yourself. I mean, anyone that's come and workshop with me, I'll give you half rate compared to that geezer.
Hey, just pay him in beautiful cardamom chocolate. That'd be fine.
That works. See, it worked with you, didn't it?
Absolutely.
You see,
we're here. I'm happy. That's how you do it. Just give me some chocolate. There's a quote from a very silly movie, quite an old movie, but a wonderful film nonetheless. I was watching it this afternoon, The Princess Bride. I'm happy to be doing a talk with one of the stars of that tomorrow over at Waterstone's Piccadilly. Anyway, that's another conversation. But there's a quote from the movie which is, "Life is pain, and anyone who tells you different is trying to sell you something." That's
it in a nutshell. I
just love that, and I heard that again and went, "That is so true."
That's so true. Yeah, it's a brilliant script.
So true. It's a stunning script, actually. Yeah, definitely great. Anyway, so look, what we're saying is, if you think you might need the help of some type of relationship confidence giving seminar, gents, don't waste your cash. Okay, Jamie, just get in touch with Jamie on Twitter, and he'll give you some simple advice, which is be yourself. And maybe smell nice.
And dance well. Dancing. It's all about dancing.
No, not everyone can dance well.
Well, you know,
do your best.
It's all about losing yourself on the dance floor. It's fantastic. Except when I'm doing it with my Anita, because then we get banned from the club because we do, what's it called? Wrecking. You're
moshing away in a club, are you?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing.
That makes me happy to hear. Right. Now, this is something I know that every time you come on, we do talk about this, but I know it's because it's an issue that you are insanely passionate about. So, taxpayers to fund hundreds of fracking boreholes across the country. Tell us more about this story.
Well, I work with a number of anti-fracking groups, including Talk Fracking, which is really interesting. And so I've been watching it closely over the year, and there is a PR blitzkrieg happening in the UK at the moment. It's impossible to estimate how many millions are being poured into making the country think that fracking is a great energy solution, that the government is right to be pursuing it at all costs. And it's not really working. You know, there's nearly 200 community groups across the country who have looked at it for themselves. You only have to look at it for a couple of minutes to realise that, no, it's not entirely safe. And there are a lot of reasons why it should be considered as a threat, a potential threat. All we're being told about is the potential benefits, and we're not being told about the potential threats. And that's just totally undemocratic. There's a total democratic deficit here. And this story is yet, I think, another sort of PR stunt. They've invented a very official, reliable sounding organisation that is going to monitor drilling of holes to monitor ground movement and water pollution, slammed as an attempt to dupe public over shale gas safety. So what's happening is they've got this organisation it's run by connected to the British Geological Survey Society, who are very much behind fracking, and it's addressing the fact that most of the people who are challenging fracking, one of the things that they pick out on is the threat to our groundwater. Obviously, the threats to our water are really, really serious. And that rings alarm bells straight away. Because what it is it's a PR stunt. Okay, well, this is one of the things they're all fearful of, so let's create a very sensible sounding scientific survey, and we're going to drill these holes just so we can reassure the country that it's safe, your water's safe. But they're using 80 million of our own money to drill these holes to see if they can invent these ways to say, no, we've done these holes and we've kind of done this special scientific monitoring, and we can say that we're pretty sure that your water's going to be safe. Now look at this, okay? So it's awaiting final approval from the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills, all right? Happens to be Energy Minister Matthew Hancock, who is a massive fracking enthusiast, also holds a ministerial post in the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills. There's a lot of situations here where, let's put it into Caroline Lucas's words, because she does it very well. There's no justification for using public money to help the fracking industry pull the wool over people's eyes. It's another desperate attempt to quell legitimate public concern and may further undermine public trust. So she puts it in quite a straight way, but you're going to love this, right? Tony, what's his name? Tony Bosworth from Friends of the Earth. He says the government is behaving like a love-struck teenager, showering the shale gas industry with gifts. It's not content with changing trespass laws and handing out tax breaks. Taxpayers may now have to fork out for the industry's research, okay? And it's really just, in my opinion, okay, it's really just a way of trying to win over social licence. You're just not going to do it. And he touched on something very important. The infrastructure bill has been rushed through government at the moment. And it's absolutely horrific. It allows you to drill, they can drill under your house, and you can't stop them doing that. But also they can then fill those once they finish doing whatever they're doing with the drilling, they can fill it with anything they like. They can fill it with radioactive waste. So they're slipping in all these things. You know, if you look at the people who are voting for it in government and in the Lords, you can easily cross-reference them with people who've got vested interest in it. They've got the revolving door between people in the energy industries being seconded to the Energies Department and writing legislation. It just goes on and on. It's really, really spurious. And I'm not saying, you know, what I'm saying is the country deserves to know both sides, and they're just not getting it. And it's a fact, you know, for what you teach as well, it's very interesting. Look at the PR campaign, the pro-fracking PR campaign. It's a test case. And a lot of people are saying that it's the biggest PR campaign that we've seen in the past since the war. They're saying that more money's been ploughed into this than they've seen in anything else before. It's shocking.
Now, Jamie, obviously, and again, you come at this from a perspective, and my job here in the chair is to at least play devil's advocate as and when it's possible.
Yeah.
With an energy crisis that is looming in this country, the government do need to do something.
Yes.
And they are promising, after the pressure groups like the ones you're connected to have placed upon them and put the negative side in the headlines, they are now promising that they're going to look further into it. They're going to investigate it. And yes, there is some connection, some lobbies, I'm sure, that are making that point, that there are some benefits to this, and they're making that point to the government, and the government's listening.
Absolutely.
But at least they're saying they're going to have a look. So if that means they're using public money to look, and if this is a potential way, mixed with other ways to gather energy, that we can be less reliant on foreign suppliers, surely there has to be some merit in that.
Well, if that was the real motivation, because obviously I don't believe it is at all, I think it's just a PR stunt, they'd have a moratorium, which is what many countries have done. And most of the countries have had moratoriums. They've finished the moratorium by looking into it with independent scientific research and gone, not for us. You know, France isn't having it. That's got a huge amount of shale underneath it. But they're not having it. It's absolutely banned. They had a moratorium, came to the end of it and went, no, it's insane to do this. It's just, what you're risking is just far outweighs the potential benefits. Germany's banned it. The place where modern high-volume hydraulic fracturing was invented, Denton in Texas, they've actually banned it. I mean, the States is really interesting because they've had it for quite a while. And if you listen to the people who are living there, so there's a lot of, I suppose, testimony, but also there's a huge amount of scientific evidence that peer-reviewed evidence that's emerging from the States. We're lucky in a sense because we know what the long-term effects of it. We begin to see what the long-term effects of it are by looking at America. And so we should be looking at that ourselves as individuals, you know, who are proud of being British. You go and look at it for yourself. And then you will say, look, this is not what we've been told, and there's some really serious things. I agree with you. They'll easily spin that and say, well, yeah, we're taking account of your fears, and that's why we're doing this stunt. But if that was true, you'd have a moratorium. Because what will happen is if you have a moratorium within 1.5 years, if it's long enough, by then, the amount of peer-reviewed science that says this is an incredibly stupid thing to do, short-term gains for the 0.001%, and long-term devastation. That's what it looks like. An incredible toxic legacy to leave your children. And your point about, well, we have to have some fair energy future. Well, of course we do. The advancement of solar photovoltaics, okay, is advancing around about 3 years' worth of advances happening within every year. It's going extraordinarily well. And we spend, I mean, if we go into the climate change story, you'll have some statistics there, but we spend 6 times more on subsidising the fossil fuel industry than we do on the renewable industry. Despite that, it's advancing, exponentially. You know, what Caroline talks about, what you want to do is invest in cutting 30% of our emissions by, retrofitting all our buildings, when you keep the energy in, oh God, I've lost my words, I beg your pardon. And the other thing that it is to encourage community-owned renewable sources of energy. That's the way forward, and they're already here for us to do. But also, if you reduce our emissions by retrofitting our houses, all our buildings, to insulation. That's it, insulation.
Sorry,
right?
I could have helped with that.
Yeah. But that's where we should be putting our energy. Okay, our investments into making sure that we don't emit so much. That would create 10 to 20,000 jobs instantly. 100 to 200,000
so
jobs
retaining the heat
immediately.
you've already created better
Yeah,
would
absolutely.
help, and dealing with our energy differently.
Yeah.
Jamie, I could talk to you all night, but I can't. I need to let you go so you can go and have, some sleep before you start your week again. So I definitely wanted us to talk about this because I know this is something that you're terribly passionate about.
Great.
So, but before I let you go, tell me more about what was happening on Friday with the Occupy group. Can you?
Of course I can, with pleasure. Thank you. So I was involved in the Occupy London movement in 2011 and 2012, where we were outside St Paul's for four and a half months. That was a life changer for a lot of people. And now what's emerged is Occupy democracy. So a lot of people are looking at, our upcoming general election, saying there is nobody that you can vote for who aren't completely in the service of corporations. They believe that this is a corporatocracy or a kleptocracy. And what they're saying, what they're doing is they're going down to Parliament. They were there for 9 days a couple of weeks ago, and now what they're doing is coming back once every month at the moment. So it's hashtag Occupy Democracy. And I was there on Friday. They were there from about 6:30, and they've probably cleared out by now. Average age 24. These were not hardened activists in any way whatsoever. These were young people who have actually gone further than the first story, where we were talking about young people giving up on the system, so going for Green Party or UKIP. These people have gone way beyond that. And what they're saying is that we need systemic change, which was the message of Occupy. We need basic systemic change. And a young guy today who I met last night, he de-locked himself to the bars outside Big Ben, exactly where the suffragettes had done 110 years ago. And he was a really lovely guy, and he articulated himself incredibly well. He was talking about how there's absolutely no future for people of his generation, how they're going to inherit catastrophic climate change, how they've got nobody to vote for who is independent of corporate or financial institution interests, and there's no chance of people like him being able to get an education because they can never pay for the fees, and they're being left with nothing. But they have a vision of what would be a much better world. It goes back to George right at the beginning. He was saying, why isn't there a young person's party? And George is right, because I met more articulate people in that group last night and the night before, discussing politics in a far more balanced and equal way. And they were depicting a world I'd fight for. In fact, a world that a lot of us would fight for, and people like me are increasing all the time. We would really fight for it. There's a very, very heavy police presence because they don't want us there at all. I mean, look at this, people of London, for the democracy that we're so proud of. Parliament Square is somewhere, Parliament is to talk, okay? It's just across the road from the House of Parliament. I'd say about 50 people turned up at 6:30, or 100 people turned up at 6:30 on Friday evening. There were at least as many police. The entire square was fenced off, the pavement, just by the pavement as well, so there's hardly anywhere to congregate. And so we kept going to find spaces to meet and have an assembly so we could talk about why we're here and what we're going to do. Everywhere we went, we were surrounded and kettled. And eventually people ended up just outside the Supreme Court. And they've stayed there all the time. They've been there through the night. They've been there in the rain. We were really incensed by the fact that this whole police cordoning, involving loads of dogs as well, also had caged up Nelson Mandela. And in fact, we came to that statue and we were trying to raise awareness about the fact that Nelson Mandela, who's in that list of 80 great individuals, he's the first individual named on his own, that he was caged and being guarded by dogs and police from people who want to come and talk about democracy and a better way forward. And that struck me as being disgraceful and embarrassing to be English. And the way that the police were defending it, they were using dogs as well, which is extraordinary. I felt ashamed to be British. But then I spent, Friday evening and Saturday evening with the young people, and I felt very proud to be British. So I really recommend people to look into Occupy Democracy and support them. That we're not violent, we're not kind of Molotov making ketamine addicted idiots. These are visionary people, and it takes courage. It takes courage to lock your neck, however old Aaron is, he's about 20, to lock your neck to a bar. It's frightening. The police are frightening. It's a hard thing to do in the rain, and under all the circumstances and the fear. Good on him, and I'm very proud of him, and I'm very proud of all those young people there. And the people listening, look into it yourself, because you'll be proud of them as well.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your opinions. I know people listening may not necessarily agree with everything you just said or described, But you know how it works on BBC London 94.9. We'll give you a platform, and we're very proud to be able to, it's a democracy. We can talk, we can all have a chat. So whether you agree and you're behind the sort of things Jamie was just talking about there with the Occupy democracy movement, or whether you're completely against it, you can now give us a call and have a chat about it. 0207 224 2000. That's our telephone number. I'll say it nice and slowly. 0207 224 2000. Call us and give us your thoughts. I'll run through the subjects again in a moment, and I promise I'll give you the text number, and I'll even let you know how you can get in touch on Twitter. Before you go, Jamie, talking of Twitter, if people want to know more about you and find out more about what you've got to say every day of the week.
So my Twitter feed is at Jamie Kelsey, Kelsey, Fry, Fry. New Internationalist is at New Int. And the active citizenship training is at Rax Toolkit, RAX. Please get in touch. I'm really interested to see what people think about these things, and come and join groups like us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jamie. You look after yourself. Bit of music on BBC London 94.9.
Well, I guess it would.